All right, let's get into it. Back in 1968, Pope Paul VI put out a document that would become one of the most significant, and let's be honest, one of the most debated church documents of the entire 20th century. It's called Humanae Vitae, which is Latin for of human life. And really, it all comes down to this one massive question. What happens when a 2,000-year-old faith slams right into a modern cultural revolution? That's the collision we're going to look at today.
I mean, think about the 1960s. It was just a whirlwind of change, right? The sexual revolution was kicking into high gear. The birth control pill hits the scene. And even the Catholic Church is in the middle of this huge self-examination with the Second Vatican Council. And right into the middle of all that chaos, Humanae Vitae lands.
So, it's super important to get this. This wasn't some easy decision made in a quiet room. It came out of a time of incredible pressure, and the church itself was deeply, deeply divided on the issue. After the big council, the world was buzzing with these new, challenging questions for the church. And right at the top of the list was this one. Was the church finally going to change its ancient teaching and give Catholics the green light to use artificial contraception? So to figure this out, a special commission was put together. Bishops, theologians, even married couples. And what's fascinating is how split they were. You had a majority, a big chunk of the group, saying, hey, it's time to change, let's relax the ban. But then you had this smaller group warning that, whoa, hold on a second. For them, this wasn't just some church rule you could update. They believed it was a divine and natural law, something woven into creation itself by God, and you just can't change that.
So you can imagine Pope Paul VI right in the middle of this firestorm. He spent years praying on it, studying it, and in the end, he sided with the minority. He chose to reaffirm what he believed was the church's constant, unchanging teaching on the sanctity of human life.
Okay, so to really get why he made this incredibly countercultural decision, we have to look at the core argument of the document. It all comes down to what it says are the two inseparable meanings of married love. Humanae Vitae says that married love is supposed to be this incredible reflection of God's love. So what does that mean? Well, it says it has to be fully human, body and soul. It has to be total, a complete gift of yourself. It has to be faithful, exclusive, and finally, it has to be fruitful, which means open to the possibility of creating new life. And this right here is the absolute heart of the teaching. The document argues that every time a husband and wife come together, that act has two meanings that you just can't pull apart. There's the unitive side, the love, the bonding, the intimacy. And then there's the procreative side, the fact that this act is naturally ordered toward creating life. The Pope's argument was that when you use contraception, you're intentionally breaking that sacred connection. Now, this doesn't mean the church is against family planning, not at all. In fact, it actually promotes something called responsible parenthood. It encourages couples to learn about their own fertility cycles, to space out pregnancies, but to do it in a natural way that respects how the body is designed instead of suppressing it.
All right, now we get to the part of the document that really set the world on fire. It's probably the most famous and, for a lot of people, the most startling section. Pope Paul VI didn't just explain the teaching, he made some bold predictions about the future.
Yeah, he didn't just lay down the law, he kind of looked into a crystal ball and asked, okay, what's the fallout going to be if society ignores this? What happens to the world when we widely separate sex from procreation? He laid out three very specific warnings. First, he predicted a general lowering of moral standards and a rise in cheating in marriages. Second, he worried that women would be objectified, kind of reduced to instruments for pleasure. And third, he warned that governments could abuse their power and start forcing birth control policies on people. And you have to understand, from the document's point of view, these predictions weren't about rejecting science or progress. They were meant as a really solemn warning, a defense of what it saw as the profound dignity of the human person. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. The encyclical wasn't just a list of don'ts and scary warnings. It also had this really positive, though definitely challenging, call to action for married couples and for all of society. Look, the Pope wasn't naive. He knew this teaching would be really hard to follow. So he called on couples to practice virtues like self-discipline and sacrifice, believing that in the long run, it would actually make their love stronger and bring them peace. And he made it clear, this is only possible with the help of God's grace. And this phrase right here pretty much sums up the whole message. The document calls couples to see themselves not as the masters of life with total control, but as ministers, like partners or stewards, who are cooperating with God's creative plan.
So here we are, more than 50 years later.
And Humanae Vitae is just as controversial today as it was the day it was released. Its supporters look at those warnings and say they were amazingly prophetic, while its critics still see it as tragically out of touch.
But in the end, the entire document, every argument, it all rests on this one foundation of belief, which Pope Paul VI puts so simply. Human life is sacred. From its very inception, it reveals the creating hand of God.